if you think about how many movies were cranked out in the 80s, I feel like there was no other time that movies were being cranked out like crazy, like in the 80s. And, cocaine does that.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yanis Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this show, we democratize the film criticism conversation by bringing on fans and critics alike to dig into their personal connection to a current or classic release. This episode, we're going to be talking about the 1984 horror comedy family Christmas movie, I guess, Gremlins. And I'm honored to welcome to the show Cristian Garcia. Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast.
Hello.
So tell people a little bit about your show, Nerds with Friends, and why they need to check that out.
Because we're funny as fuck. No, so we usually do, at least recently, a lot of current movie reviews, but we also do video games, books, anything and everything nerdy. So we try to cater to our guests. So if we have a guest on that they specifically nerd out on something, we will cater to that genre of nerddom. We try to get guests all the time. We try to get a lot of voice actors, comedians. We've had like one cosplayer. We try to hit all aspects of all nerddoms.
That's cool. And especially nowadays where being, everything nerdy seems like is everything mainstream now. I mean, every time you turn around, there's another, comic book movie or Game of Thrones type show or something like that to talk about. So, I mean, there's no shortage of material for you guys.
Isn't that a bitch, though? Like, growing up, the stuff I was into, like, that was weird. And now it's like what's cool. It's like, dude, I could have been hanging out with, like, all the cool kids if I was a kid now. It's like, but no. Like, no. I guess I was raised out of time, I guess.
Yeah, it makes me think of, what is it? I think 21 Jump Street, one of them, where when they were in school, that was the situation. And then now all the nerds are the cool kids and the jocks are sort of more of the outcasts, I think was the idea. And that, yeah, it's exactly like that.
It's like, what the fuck, man? Like that, we paved the road for all these kids today, man. It fucking sucks.
We did. We really did. And, people today, especially with, I was thinking specifically the superhero thing. Back in the day, all we had was Batman, and that's pretty much it. Just kind of Batman for a while.
We had, there was the X-Men. There was the X-Men cartoon.
That's true.
There was the Ninja Turtles.
Oh, man, Ninja Turtles. Now you're speaking my language.
See?
I was all about
in all
Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, man, I collected the Marvel trading cards. I don't remember if it's the 90s one. I almost have a complete set. I think I'm missing some of the holograms, and I hate the fact that I can't remember the card set right now.
What was kind of your first big nerd property that you got into as a kid? Because for me, it's probably, oh man, I think I was like 5 years old, and I was watching like Masters of the Universe and things like that, and then of course, Ghostbusters and Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers and all of that stuff. So what was like your first big property that brought you into like nerd culture? You
just said it, but I would say growing up, me and my brother, we used to have the He-Man action figures.
Yes.
And so I don't even remember the purple. Was it purple or green? I don't even remember. Or was he mixed? The tiger he rode in on.
Oh, yeah.
We would fight over, who was going to play with it, and He-Man. So I would say, think of it. Actually, no, like those were mine. My brother would try to take it from me, but I would say Transformers was like his biggest thing. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I was into Transformers, not as big as he was. Later on, when he turned 18, he got the Decepticon of all things symbol on his calf. So that's how hardcore Transformers he was/is, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like I missed the whole Transformers thing because I was so focused on the properties I mentioned that I wasn't super into Transformers at that time. So then when the movies started happening, I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm familiar with that, but it's not like something that really struck a chord with me as a kid. Yeah,
that's another thing Michael Bay managed to destroy for us, along with Ninja Turtles.
Oh God, yeah. It's that's funny now that they have the Masters of the Universe Netflix show, I guess, that Kevin Smith is doing. That's sort of following up with that. So I'm kind of curious how that's going to turn out.
Oh, is that out?
No, not yet. It's happening. That's been announced. That's like he's show running it, I guess, or whatever. And I'm a big Kevin Smith fan too, so I'm kind of interested how that combination is going to work.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. We're in the process. I want to try to get Jason Mewes on our podcast. It would be amazing. We were lucky enough to interview the kind folks at Legion M. And Legion M, they're the ones who were working with Kevin Smith to do Jay and Silent Bob reboot. So we jokingly asked, like, hey, can we get Kevin Smith? And they're like, it was a struggle to get him on. Like, I think I forgot what news outlet. So we were like, Jason Mewes? And they're like, that's probably a little bit more doable. It's like, we'll see. Well, who knows? I don't want to promise anyone who's listening that we're going to get him. It's just us high hoping that we will.
Yeah, no, that would be a really great get. How long have you guys been doing the podcast? What was give us the kind of secret origin behind Nerds with Friends and what caused you to start it up?
Cody actually wrote a funny story, like a fake origin story. It's on the website. But in reality, me and Cody would just on weekends, like hang out at a bar, like like Saturdays, Sundays, we would just meet up at a bar, have a couple drinks and just nerd out with me, him, and a couple other friends. And, we always tried to make each other laugh. And we're like, hey, what? We were just like, why don't we try doing a podcast, see what happens? And that was like almost 7 years ago. And we're just, it gives us a reason to hang out, have a good time. Hopefully people listening also have a good time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a lot of times, sometimes the best, at least entertainment podcasts is that you just kind of fly on the wall style, just letting people in on the conversations that you would be having anyway. It just happens to be a mic on, and I think that's cool. I applaud you guys for sticking with it for so long. It's not easy sometimes to keep a podcast going for a long period of time. And I've had this one over a few years, but I wasn't really making it a focus for a while. How do you guys find the time to really make it a priority and generate that fresh content, on a regular basis?
I mean, we do it anyway. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I got to cover that.
No, like we go, like we are genuine fans of what we talk about. And I think that's like the secret sauce of any podcast. Like if you're not actually into what you're talking about, the audience can they can smell it, Mm-hmm. And we genuinely nerd out about the things we talk about. We're huge fans. I'm sure even sometimes some of the listeners like, all right, dude, if you guys talk about the Dark Tower one more time, because we're huge Stephen King fans. And I mean, we do it because we love it, and hopefully people who listen also enjoy it.
How did, you mentioned Stephen King. How did you feel about It Chapter 2 then? Which is
it's funny. I'm writing an article about doing for Geek Vibes Nation, which is another podcast that I hop on as a guest a lot. And I'm trying to do a comparison of the book and the movie. And I loved the movie. It, to me, is the closest rendition of film or from book to film. The only thing that I wish, and we talked about on the podcast, is we wish that Stephen King would get the MCU treatment. Because he's developed his own entire universe, and everything leads to the Dark Tower. And that was some things that we wish we had seen in the movie, like some Easter eggs. I don't know if you've read the book, but there was a turtle that they showed a little bit in the movie in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. And he is a big deal in the book. His name is Maturin, and he's like the counterpart of it. It likes to think of himself as being this god deity from the Macroverse. I'm probably getting too much into it for anyone who hasn't read the book and just seen the movies. But he's created this huge universe that we wish we can see in the films. And I just wish that someone would give Stephen King that treatment, because when it comes to his books, to his movies, they don't always come out great, man. And this film was, to me, amazing. It didn't do everything that was in the book, but the things that they took out, I totally understand why they did. And I also really did enjoy the fact that they would kind of make fun of Bill's character, where they were like, oh, yeah, he makes great books, shitty endings, because Stephen King kind of gets that gets that treatment where it's like, oh, it was an awesome book, but I wasn't really feeling the ending. I'm not one of those people. I'm like, if the person who's creating, they have full rights to create the way they want to create. If you didn't like the ending, well, that's too bad for you. You're not the creator.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so I love the movie. I'm not afraid of clowns, so I didn't really think it was scary, but I thought it was a great, awesome film.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I feel like I'm kind of in the minority. I feel it's getting a lot of divisive reaction on film Twitter and beyond, and I found it more like darkly funny than I did really scary in a way. Just I think it's because it's such a supernatural force. It's like there's no such thing as a demon clown. That's not that scary. I mean, it's more dark fantasy than it is horror to me in a lot of ways. And I guess the Hulu show Castle Rock is the closest they really come to a Stephen King universe. So hopefully maybe that's something they'll do at some point, because I agree that would be really cool to see on screen. And I think as far as the Maturin thing, I think I'd read somewhere that they did film something with the turtle. So I'm hoping that'll end up in the like super cut, whatever that I'm sure that they're working on now. So we'll definitely keep an eye out for that. But yeah, cool.
If it's in the extras of the DVDs or the Blu-rays, I'm all about it. I'm totally gonna get it.
Yeah. My only thing I think with it Chapter 2 is that it does feel like the first one was designed to be more of a standalone, and because of that, the second film kind of bears all the weight of filling in the story. You know what I mean? Like that's why I almost think the recut version would probably flow a lot better and not leave all the mythology on the second half. So. But I mean, I that's not really much of a complaint, just more of an observation. And because I enjoyed it a lot, so I'm glad we're on the same page with that.
And if you haven't read The Dark Tower, read The Dark Tower. And everyone who's listening, go read The Dark Tower. It's just so great, and it'll lead you to other Stephen King books. Or if you've read other Stephen King books, most of those lead to The Dark Tower. So it's the guy to me is an amazing fucking storyteller, and I mean he's a big in writing, but I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves.
Yeah, well, for sure. Well, I'm sure that they're doing something they're supposed to do a show, right, of The Dark Tower. So maybe they'll. I don't know what happened with the plans after that movie that came out, and
that movie was nothing at all like the book, not even close. And that, like, I was excited when they got Idris Elba to play Roland, but even he couldn't save it. It was just so terrible. Yeah.
So to be continued to the whole Stephen King universe. We'll see.
Hopefully.
So for today, we're going to be talking about the 1984 film Gremlins. So let's listen to a little bit of the trailer right now.
Billy Peltzer has a nice home.
Billy, is that you?
Yeah, Mom, it's me.
A nice job. A nice girl.
If you're not doing anything this Thursday night, maybe you'd like to go out on a date with me?
I'd love to.
And loving parents who are about to give him...
You're gonna like this. No, don't shake it. We're gonna have to open it now. It won't wait till Christmas.
The most unusual gift he ever got.
What is it?
No.
It's your new pet.
Come on, Barney, be a good dog. My dad gave it to me.
But there are a few things to keep in mind. If you expose it to the light, you may hurt it. If you get it wet, it will multiply.
All that from water? They got wet?
Yeah, plain water.
And most important, no matter how much they beg, never let them eat after midnight. Because when they do, they change.
That was a little bit of the trailer for Gremlins from 1984, directed by Joe Dante. So, Christian, why did you want to talk about Gremlins specifically? I mean, I have the form that prospective guests can fill out. You had your first choice, Gremlins, and your second choice, Gremlins. So, why did you want to talk about Gremlins so much? Not that I'm arguing, because any excuse to talk about a movie like this that I grew up with is welcome, but.
It's probably the first movie that I remember watching as a kid that I both loved watching and kind of scared me as a kid. And it's probably one of the films that I probably researched the most about and fanboy the hardest about. It's for kids, it was a little scary, but it was also a little funny. And And even as I watch it every Christmas, I watch the movie. And to this day, just the carefulness of the puppets of the Gremlins, like it was amazing puppetry. And to me, it still holds up today. And I just I know that there's talks about them either doing a new one or rebooting it. And I hope that if they do, they keep it all practical effects and puppets. I really don't want to see any CG Gremlins. Yeah. It's probably one of the movies that I can watch anytime or, a couple times a day. And it's probably just because I saw it and loved it as a kid. And yeah, I mean, any excuse to talk about Gremlins, I'll take it.
Yeah, same. No, I actually, I did want to mention that it is one of those perfect kind of alt Christmas movies, the Die Hard, where it's technically a Christmas movie, not about Christmas, but set at Christmas, so it still kind of works. And I grew up with this one as well. It's kind of crazy thinking that this was one of the biggest hits of 1984. It came out June 8th, the same day as Ghostbusters, and both of those were huge, pivotal movies for me. And this made $150 million back then, which is really impressive. But yeah, I think it's also not only is it the tonal balance, but it's pivotal in cinema history, as with this and Temple of Doom, as if listeners don't know, I'm sure you already know this. That was instrumental in the creation of the PG-13 rating, which we'll get into some of the violence and all that stuff in here, and how it's really kind of crazy that this is technically kind of marketed as a kids movie, considering how much crazy shit happens in it. But
I had no idea about the Temple of Doom. I've always thought that it was Gremlins that was credited with the PG-13, but you said it was Temple of Doom?
I think it was both of them, because they both were kind of coming out around the same time, and they're both, I think, rated PG, but it was the conversations behind the scenes that led to them being well, R is too hard, PG might be too light for this kind of thing going forward. So that's what really led to PG-13 becoming a viable option. And now, of course, today, pretty much any movie that's marketed to kids, unless it's explicitly animated or something, is PG-13. I mean, every superhero movie is PG-13 at this point.
Side note, I love Temple of Doom as well. And that's one of those movies where, even though Cody is my homeboy, that's one of my best friends, he fucking hates Temple of Doom. He loves Indiana Jones, but he hates Temple of Doom. And that's one of my favorite ones. So it's kind of interesting that it was both.
Yeah.
Two of my favorite movies that created a PG-13.
Yeah, I haven't seen Temple of Doom in a long time. I should probably go back and rewatch that, because I'm curious how I would feel about it now. So do you have any, this is one of those movies that's so ingrained, probably in both of us, that do you have any idea when you first saw Gremlins, or is it just one of those movies that you just feel like you've always known about?
I mean, I probably saw it when I was 4 or 5, to be honest. My parents were, so I'm Mexican American. So my parents, migrated over here to the United States. So they probably didn't know too much what I probably should watch and probably shouldn't watch. I feel like their theory was well, if he watches it and they don't ask any questions, it was probably okay. Is kind of what I think their parenting theory was.
So watching it now, how do you feel about the appropriateness of this film for a 4-year-old, and the way that the way that the violence is kind of carried on screen? Because my wife and I have a almost 3-year-old, and I'm she's not gonna watch this for a while, just because it is kind of crazy and intense for a toddler, in my opinion. What are kind of your thoughts on that watching it now?
The scenes with Mrs. Peltzer alone,
especially
taking
those,
out taking out almost the majority. And that's one thing. Shout out to Miss Peltzer. I feel like she never gets any credit. She was fucking badass. She almost took out the entire issue and problem by herself. It was her alone in her kitchen, badass as fuck, with her knife and her little I guess it was a little table she was using as a shield. And that's actually one of my favorite scenes. Mm-hmm. Dude, this, she fucking kicked all their asses, by herself, until she caught off guard by one.
Yeah, she really did. And it's funny because the movie, you don't really get legit shot of a gremlin until I noted this about 50 minutes in, like literally halfway point pretty much, when one of the gremlins pops out on Billy in that scene. And then you have the classic horror setup of her in the house, the gremlins are loose, and Billy calls her, he's like, "Mom, get out of the house," that kind of thing. And yeah, I so you go from no gremlins to holy shit, like an invasion of gremlins in that one sequence. And let's see, I think she kills one in the mixer, and then she like viciously stabs one to death, and then of course the microwave scene.
She nukes the other one.
So there's 5, I think, including Stripe, and she kills 3 of them.
She kills 3, and then the one in the Christmas tree catches her off guard.
Right. And then Billy has to jump in and that's the one that gets decapitated. And then the head rolls into the fire. Oh man, it's crazy. I love that scene. And the thing that's cool about this movie is that it's not only is it legitimately suspenseful, but it's the way that the gremlins are depicted as this kind of like almost like tricksters sort of characters, that they're just insanely deadly mischievous. You think one of them even says, he pulls the phone cord and he's like says something like "phone home," which is a reference of course to E.T., which is also produced or also a Steven Spielberg who produced this movie. So the little Easter eggs and little gags and things like that, I love all of that. And I also found it really ironic that this is a movie where there's a villainous character that's kind of hell-bent on murdering a dog, and yet the Mrs. Peltzer basically murders 3 kind of animals in this rampage scene, and I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, I guess they're animals, right? I mean,
kind of. Well, they start all well. Yeah, that's the thing. They're animal. Like Gizmo's kind of an animal. He's portrayed as essentially a pet throughout the course of the movie. So,
because I was thinking, are they mythological? I don't know. The myth really just came about in World War II. So I mean, they're kind of new-ish. They haven't there's not a whole lot of folklore about them. So yeah, I guess in this movie they treat them like I guess weird creatures.
Yeah,
they go from a mammal to a reptile, I guess, out of nowhere.
yeah. They just turn into animals. So yeah, no, I like that. That's of course the general idea. You have Dick Miller and talking about the Gremlins in the World War II and things like that. And that was the general idea for this movie. That kind of the manifestation of those Gremlins. I think that was it's a fun origin that the seed of this idea and what it turns out to be throughout the course of the movie. Talk a little bit about you were mentioning the puppetry earlier. To talk a little bit about that and why, I was going to say what role it plays in making this movie so special, but I think it is kind of the central takeaway, I guess, for this film and why it's endured for so long.
Well, I guess as a kid, I was always fascinated by the puppets in themselves, but now as an adult, I appreciate the hours and time that it would have taken just in the bar scene alone, when you see them, you see their feet walking, and you see one for whatever reason break dancing, and just as an adult, I'm like, that had to take a lot of planning. There was probably a plank on top. There was probably 3 guys underneath just manipulating the puppet alone. And I always try to research how films are made, because I feel like actors and directors are always the ones that get the big credit, but there's a shit ton of other people that never really get the spotlight shined on them. So shout out to all the puppet guys. I'm sure they're listening. You guys did an amazing job. And just all of those shots were just so great. And the planning, it had to have taken so many man hours just to get the shot of the gremlin just breakdancing, and I just appreciate everyone who worked on the film.
It's also, I think, in this movie that you could tell watching it, as an adult more closely, that the combination of different techniques that they use, because obviously they have the kind of animatronic puppets. There's marionettes at some point. I mean, you mentioned how they're walking. I'm assuming that's probably some of the marionettes. They even made large masks for some of the close-ups. For Gizmo
The
specifically.
close-up shots. Yeah. I think they said they were 2 or 3 feet big or something like that. His head.
Right, exactly. And that kind of thing, it's just they don't really do that anymore. And I think especially in the 80s, because I grew up heavily into the Muppets. I'm still into the Muppets. So that was, that's something I'm sharing with my toddler nowadays. So that's something that I think is really sort of in a way a lost art for the most part, because I mean it's still being done here and there. I mean the Dark Crystal show that just went on Netflix, things like that. But you
beat me to it.
Yeah, but it's something that it's unfortunately not really used very much. And I think you watch a heavily CG movie from 5 years ago and it already looks really dated, whereas this is now 35 years old essentially. And for the most part, there's very few seams in this film. I mean, everything looks legit because it is it is like we said, it is practical effects. I mean, even little things like when Stripe jumps into the pool and is getting ready to replicate, that's pretty much just glowing lights and like little water jets and strobe effects, but it works. And you're into the story and it sucks you into the world. And I think it's a real shame that we don't see that kind of thing as much and everything is just green screen.
I think, since you mentioned the pool scene, I still think it's hilarious that he plugs his little nose as he's like sinking in.
Yeah, he does. Oh man, I love Stripe.
But yeah, you mentioned the Dark Crystal, and as I was watching that show, I was like, oh my God, like they just, like Jim Henson just brought puppets, or the Jim Henson Company, I should say, brought puppets up again, like another level. And I really hope that this kind of like just makes a resurgence of practical effects. There was obviously some CG in it, and CG is great. I don't want to knock anyone who does CG. My girlfriend's brother works in CG. I always try to get him to tell me what he's working on, and the guy, whatever company he's working for, those MDAs or the NDAs, like really, like he really never talks about it. But as great as CG is and is getting and is improving, it's just still not there where I feel like it would beat a practical effect. Just because though computers are getting better at light hitting something, and it's a little bit of light is also going to bounce off that and show off another surface. So my background's in illustration, so like I always try to look for those imperfections, and usually I do find them in CG. And I feel for people who haven't studied art, even though you're not conscious of seeing it, your brain still picks it up, and it'll still tell you, there's something a little bit off about that. I can't put my finger on it, but there's something off about it. And you don't need to do that with practical effects. You have the puppet or the maquette, and nature's going to do the rest. Light's going to bounce off where it has to. So I hope that we hopefully see some more of practical effects. I'm okay with the marriage of mostly practical effects and a little bit of CG just to enhance something. I feel like that works pretty well. But hopefully, we get some more practical effects in movies.
I think they did use a little bit. I think there's a couple moments in this where it looked pretty obvious that they were doing some kind of stop motion, which is obviously the kind of was more the go-to for visual effects and things like that when it wasn't really able to be done with puppets. And there's certain moments I'm thinking specifically like in Beetlejuice, like the snake and things like that, where it's stop motion, so it looks dated. I think it kind of adds to the aesthetic a little bit, and actually in a way kind of makes the film work regardless. But I think there's a couple moments in here where you see some stop motion. That's like the only little inklings that I got that this was a movie that was made in the 80s as opposed to, last year, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember one scene when it's after the pool scene, and that's when there's a shit ton of them, and they're about to take over the town, and they're walking down the street. Like, you can tell that's clay in stop motion, but it's from far away. But even watching that today, it looks pretty damn good. I mean, you can tell that it's clay, but it also it's a little jarring to see them like from the puppet to that. It adds like an extra little creepy effect to it. The only other time where they didn't use puppets, I believe, was in the movie theater when they're about the shadows, the creepy shadows where it looks like they were drawn. Yeah.
So yeah, kind of obviously we had to talk about that up front, that the puppetry is amazing. And I want to talk about the tone here, because this movie was originally supposed to be way dark. I don't know how much you know about the previous iterations of the script, but apparently they had the Gremlins were like eating people, and they were like I think there was a moment, supposed to be a moment like them at a McDonald's eating the customers instead of burger. Like it was more of a cannibal situation going on. And in this one, they're just they're more. I think the body count is like 4. And their activities are more like stringing up the dog with Christmas lights and things like that.
I know there was a scene that they didn't do where Billy comes home, instead of saving his mom, they cut her head off and it rolls down the stairs.
Right.
I know that was something that was in the original script. I didn't know about the other stuff. That sounds pretty awesome too. But yeah, definitely different tone of movie if they had done that.
Do you think this movie kind of toes the line well between being horror and being like more almost quasi family friendly?
I mean, it does flirt with the line. I would say. I mean, I guess I would call it still horror, because the stuff they were doing was horrific. I mean, they weren't doing kind-hearted stuff.
Well, there are some sequences where they're more like engaged in shenanigans more than anything else, where they're just like flashing Phoebe Cates at the bar, and then just like you said, break dancing and kind of partying and going to see a Disney movie. So there's elements of them just kind of being like, goofballs more than, and like regular like troublemakers more than just like murdering people, which they dip their toe into that in this movie, but not nearly as much as I guess was intended.
I have a theory that all 80s movies, as being made, there was a lot of coke involved, a lot of cocaine.
Yeah, that's probably
and
accurate.
I feel like those scenes that you had mentioned, like where they're flashing with the sunglasses, like, yeah, some dude that was coked out, like, definitely mentioned that. And someone else who was coked out was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's film that right now. And then like they just did it. I'm not mad about it. It's hilarious.
No, it's great. Well, then to that effect, what do you? Then we'll get back to this one, but that I feel like that's a good jumping off point, because those sequences I think are really taken up to 11 in the sequel. So let's just touch on the sequel for a minute, because that made me think about the various types of gremlins in that movie and how that movie is completely batshit crazy. What are your quickly? What are your thoughts on Gremlins 2: The New Batch?
What do you mean, a bat gremlin? What's like they're just injecting themselves with DNA of other creatures? Like, that seems pretty legit. I don't hate the sequel. I don't love it as much as the original.
Right.
But I feel like it had its moments. It was kind of interesting to see an intelligent gremlin, who was still psychotic and chaotic as the other ones. It's just that he was smarter and was able to speak. I thought it was visually cool. The spider gremlin. I guess he was Stripe. I mean, it's not really Stripe, but I guess it was Stripe. It was visually cool, but I could have done without that, I guess. Rambo Gizmo was amazing. Like that was cool. He was like, "That's it. I'm sick of this shit, and you guys bullying me around. I'm fucking done. I'm gonna Rambo you motherfuckers." That was pretty cool. I did love the little crazy-eyed gremlin. I don't even know if they had names.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
I liked him as the Mogwai crazy-eyed. Like when he does a little with the twink and he throws it, still makes me laugh. Bug-eyed, crazy-eyed gremlin version of him, wasn't too much of a fan. Found him more annoying. But yeah, I mean, I still enjoyed it. I still watch it. I haven't watched as much as the original, but I still enjoy the sequel.
Yeah, that's what this one would have been had they not let those darker elements, I guess, take part. And what I think it's cool about the second one is that the second one almost functions in a lot of ways as kind of a parody of this movie. And I think that's kind of a fun dynamic in that, in here you have obviously the scene with Kate talking about why she hates Christmas, which is then parodied, which is then poked fun at in the sequel. So some of those moments, like I don't know how straight they were trying to play the Kate story, but it does come off as kind of ridiculous. What are you thoughts on that sequence, I guess, and then we'll jump into the cast.
In particular, like when they were trying to sell it as a PG movie, and yet you got this character who, like, that's one of the more serious moments and creepy moments of the film, is where she's talking about, yeah, my dad got stuck in a chimney pretending to be Santa and he died.
He broke his neck on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, like yo,
Jesus
someone
Christ.
Wrote that in, and we're like, yeah, PG for sure. Like no one double checked, like, to be like, yo, maybe we don't do that scene. Like maybe it's not necessary, because it didn't really push any of the narrative other than she's seen some shit. Like is all it really was. So yes, I did enjoy that they made fun of that in the second one. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, we're basically reacting like Billy, like, holy shit. That's fucked up.
Damn.
But that's the thing that I love about, this movie specifically, I guess, is that there are so many moments and so many things about this film that was marketed mostly to kids that are indicative of the 80s in general. And, I think about a lot of the movies that I grew up with, like Never-Ending Story or like Return to Oz, like all these really dark, fucked up movies that were kids movies that they made toys of and everything. I mean, they had a Rambo like cartoon show in the 80s. It's just like there was no limits to what was marketed to kids, and children's entertainment was extremely extremely dark, and there was not really kind of a line there. And I find that fascinating how times have changed, because there's no way in hell this would be PG now.
No.
Easily PG-13, and even with that, they probably would have toned down like some of this, like Kate's story probably wouldn't have been in there, for example. And I just, as a relic of a different time in cinema, it's always fun to go back and revisit movies around this time period.
The whole rating system to me is ridiculous. What is it? Yeah. 2 fucks, right?
Yeah.
2 fucks is an R.
Yep.
Blood and sex, right? Is that?
I believe so.
Is that what the R? It's like, okay, so the Gremlins can go, and the people died. Like they brought back, I'm forgetting his name, and he was so awesome. The guy in the tractor who told the World War II story.
Dick Miller, I think, right?
Mr. Futterman.
Yeah.
So, like, essentially in the first one, like, he was murdered. Like, he got rammed by the tractor, him and his wife. Like, yeah, that's cool, PG-13. But if you had shown, like, 2 people, like, naked, whoa. Like, can't do that. Like, murder's cool, but, a boob? No, we're not. Not doing that. That was one of the harder selling points for me on the second one. Was like, yo, Mr. Futterman hella died. Like, there's no way he would have survived that. Like, at all. That was the toughest. Out of all the things, I was cool with the flying gremlins. I was cool with the vegetable gremlin and electricity gremlin. But Mr. Futterman coming back, I don't know, bullshit, man.
Yeah.
That's some bullshit.
Jumping off of, Dick Miller, this is obviously, I'd like a cast full of 80s icons. We already mentioned Phoebe Cates, who was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, with Judge Reinhold, who's in this. And then you have Zach Galligan, who is pretty much just known for these movies, I guess, and Corey Feldman, who show up in this. I don't know. I really liked Zach Galligan's performance in these 2 movies. I think he's really fun, and I do want to see more of the 2 of them, of him and Kate, and the kind of continuation of that story if they were to make another one. What are your thoughts on the cast and the possibility of, I guess, continuing 30 something years after the sequel?
You're tasking me with, like, continuing, like, one of my childhood movies. Like, all right, so easy.
Go for it. You can do it, Christian.
Yeah, I'm sure I can. I don't know. It would be cool to see the characters come back. I'd be curious to how they did Gizmo. It'd be cool if he was like this hardened, like hard-boiled, like Mogwai.
He's been working out for 30 years, getting ready for when the Gremlins come back.
Like the second one, like, just really fucked him up. He's just like, sick of this bullshit, and just became like a gremlin hunter. Yeah. I don't know.
That would be awesome. I would watch the hell out of that.
But bringing in fresh characters, I don't know. It would actually. I mean, I feel like if they did it today, it would all be like social media. I don't know. They'd be trolling the fuck out of people, I guess, or something. I don't know. What kind of like fucking with drones, I guess. I don't know. This would be one I would want to brainstorm with Cody.
Right.
Usually both our heads combine at an issue. I feel like we come up with good stuff. I don't know if I would trust this solely on me.
I feel like if they would have... Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm not too sure what approach I'd want to take. I mean, maybe even I would try to maybe possibly explore the idea of actually going straight horror. Maybe like we've done the half goofy, half horror, full goofy with the sequel to maybe full horror in the next rendition. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of possible good angles that could be taken with it.
In a way, I feel like Gremlins for the technology age. I feel like Joe Dante already made that movie in 1988, and it's called Small Soldiers. Is kind of, I think, what that would have been if he'd done that. So I don't know. I think they have to find a different angle with that. I do really like in both films. I do really like Billy and Kate, and I think that they're pretty solid straight men in these movies too. The craziness around them, and I did really buy into. In this film specifically, the relationship between, not you think I'm going to say Billy and Kate, but actually I'm going to say with Billy and Gizmo. I buy into that relationship a lot more than I do Billy and Kate, actually. So, there's the scenes early on with them kind of bonding, and I like at the end when Billy's being taken back by Mr. Wing, and he wants to go back and say goodbye to Billy and stuff. I really like that, and I think that's where you get the little bit of that kind of Spielberg heart. Like you could feel Spielberg's influence on that whole storyline. In fact, part of it, I don't know if you know this, but part of it was that Gizmo was supposed to turn into Stripe, and that was right. And I think it was a wise move to change it, to have Gizmo sort of be the hero throughout and actually be the one to take out Stripe at the end of the film. What are your thoughts on the Billy Gizmo dynamic, and I guess Gizmo in general, because I that's a character that I still really love, and I actually think I even have like a toy of Gizmo. I had one as a kid. I actually have another one in my room here. So he's great.
I would counter your relationship of Billy with Gizmo, and I forget the dog's name. That dog. I'm not to belittle the human actors, but that dog was amazing at selling that Gizmo was real. Mm-hmm. If you go back and rewatch when he pops out of the box, the little treasure box that he's in, or when he's coming out, the dog is so interested in this little puppet. Like he sells it that this thing is real because he really wants to get like any dog would when they see like a rodent-like creature. They want to get near it. They want to smell it. Like that to me is what I feel really sells the idea of this being an actual creature. But yeah, who wouldn't? But the relationship between Billy and Gizmo is obviously special. Like who wouldn't want that little guy, chilling next to you watching TV, or hanging out, just chilling. Playing music together, he's teaching you how to use a little keyboard. Like it was a very sweet, and yeah, shout out to the actor. He did a great job. He was playing a very innocent young adult, but it didn't feel cheesy. It felt real. It felt genuine. It felt like he was like just a real, not like a simpleton, but just like had the very inner childlike personality.
Right. Yeah, he's just a decent guy, but that you can kind of root for, but also not so dynamic that he takes over the fact that this movie is about the Gremlins and not this kid and his his downtrodden job at the bank and wanting to get with Phoebe Cates, who wouldn't want to get with Phoebe Cates, by the way. Oh yeah.
Also, I feel like people kind of sleep on the fact that Billy was taking care of the entire family with his bank job.
True.
Inventor Dad was not exactly bringing in money.
Those are some of the jokes that I think work for me the best, is Rand Peltzer running around with his inventions and constantly trying to sell people on the bathroom buddy, or I see that you have an ashtray there that's broken. Oh, well, you're lucky you ran into me. Well, about this basically a piece of junk that never works, and what is it? The egg cracking machine in the kitchen that's not in the juicer that goes crazy. I loved all that stuff. That was hilarious to me. That
the juicer in particular was really funny because like he put in one orange and the amount of juice that came out of that orange, like, yo, I have not been using my oranges to their full potential.
Right,
I've been leaving a lot of juice on the table.
It's like when you see a Tarantino movie, like Kill Bill or something, and an arm gets cut off and an ungodly amount of blood comes out. You're like, that's not that much blood in the human body. So I don't know where you're going with that. But no, yeah, I loved all the stuff with the dad. I thought he was really funny in there with all the inventions and all of that. Let's talk about well, we kind of mentioned briefly the score, the Jerry Goldsmith score. I think the music is really still super memorable. The fact that Gizmo sings, and I think the Gremlins themselves also kind of, I think at one point they're doing the caroling outside Mrs. Deagle's house, and I think they're kind of just like doing the music at some point, and I ate all that shit up. And
of course, and Rockin' Ricky, let's give him credit, you know, DJ.
There's a whole hidden movie there with Rockin' Ricky getting attacked by the Gremlins, and then I guess successfully fighting them off, which we get to hear from him a couple of times. I feel like that there's a missed opportunity there for like a Gremlins short film of the adventures of Rockin' Ricky during all this.
You know, you blew my mind, dude. I never thought about that. That's a movie I want to see how he survived that shit by himself.
There you go.
In the DJ.
Gremlins 3, the Rockin' Ricky's Tale.
Just throwing like records at him, you know, just like tossing them.
God, that's so funny. So we have to talk about the rules. That's the big thing that everybody likes to, and they even make fun of it in the sequel. Well, isn't it always after midnight? At some point, like, how does that work exactly with time zones and all of that?
I always would try to sell it. It's like, okay, it's after midnight, but it would stop as soon as you see the sun coming up. That's kind of like how I always figured. Like, that's the cutoff point they can eat again.
Right. I really like that. I really like that. That's part of what I think makes this movie so memorable, in that is that it tries to create its own mythology. Like you get it sort of ham-handedly at first at the beginning. I think you could tell that they just really wanted to emphasize the rules up front. Maybe test audiences were confused or something, because Rand Peltzer's walking back to his car or whatever from the shop, and it's just like voiceover laid over it. So that felt like so obviously added in post. But what are your thoughts on, I guess, the rules as they're laid out to Billy further, earlier in the film?
I mean, I guess because I saw it as a kid, I never really questioned them. I was like, okay, don't get them wet. Okay, seems legit.
Got it.
Don't feed them after midnight. Yeah, sure. All right, I get it. I mean, yeah, I guess as an adult thinking about it, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. Like, well, so like Gizmo's just stank as fuck all the time because he legit can't shower. Like, you can't bathe him.
Yeah.
So he must just reek of turd or piss or whatever. Like, you can't get it off his fur. I'm sure he can't wipe, and if he does, it's still on him. So like, I guess
these are the questions you're not supposed to ask, I guess.
Yeah, right. Like, do you dry clean him? Like, I don't understand. I don't know. Like, if you get like a damp towel, would that activate his, like, would one gremlin or one Mogwai pop out? Like, as an adult, you think of it, but as a kid, you don't question it,
Yeah, I think the movie does a decent job at also laying out what the rules are, and then having them broken in a way that doesn't make the Peltzers look like idiots. You know what I mean? In that they know. Billy tries to follow the rules. He tries to adhere to that. It's not that he's irresponsible, because if that was the case, then we wouldn't really be rooting for him. Be like, well, yeah, this guy brought it on himself. But the Gremlins, I guess they're the Mogwais at that point, they outsmart him. They break the cord on the clock. They chew it or whatever, so that the clock doesn't look like it's ever past midnight at that point, and things like that. And Corey Feldman knocks over the water on the desk, things like that. Like, I feel like they found a way to kind of sidestep, because that classic horror movie thing. It's something that I guess Prometheus has been really accused of, where the characters are like, oh, what's this? I shouldn't touch it, but I'm gonna stick my hand in there and see what's going on. I feel like this movie finds a way to make that happen, obviously, because then there's no movie, without sacrificing the integrity of the characters.
Yeah, no, and it's funny that you brought the point up where they chewed the cord. Like, I've never looked at cold chicken from the fridge and be like, I want to eat that. Like, I've never ever thought about like, yeah, that looks appealing. But the way those little puppets were just eating that chicken and tossing the bones, like, damn, they make it look so good. Like, maybe I should try some cold.
Yeah, you're
fridge
missing out
chicken.
on something.
I don't know. Also, shout out to the teacher. I forgot the actor's name, but he did a great job. And it wasn't Billy's teacher; it was Corey Feldman's teacher. His death was, to me, one of the most tragic ones. Like, and they don't show us pretty. I mean, we can only imagine what that gremlin did to him to kill him. But that's when, that's one of the. I believe that's the first death, right? That we see.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you don't really see the other ones, but
no, yeah, he reaches under the cart, the table or whatever, and then kind of screams, and then I guess Billy finds him later with the syringe in his butt there.
Yeah, we don't know. Like, was it the syringe that did it? Did he chew his face off? Like, we don't know what he did, but the point I was trying to make is like that's the scene where we're like, holy, these things are vengeful as fuck. Like, he was mad because he drew blood. He didn't even kill him. He didn't even hurt him that bad. He just drew some blood. But that was enough to be like, yeah, I need to kill him. He took my blood. He needs to die.
Yeah, pretty much. He's like, I got to get out of here. I got to go meet my friends and go. I have a date at the bar with a lady gremlin. And I love when that does happen, when they do get wet and they start to do they start to get out of control. Gizmo, you can hear Gizmo kind of go like being really sad and like, because he knows what's going on. He's like, not again with this shit. Like, how many times has poor Gizmo like stepped in a puddle or something? and then there's been this whole situation that had to be contained essentially.
Yeah, and like, does he drink water? Can he drink water? Like, if he puts it in his mouth, it's like the mouth part, the only part that doesn't activate him.
He has saliva, I'm assuming, and things. I mean, his internal organs, I'm assuming, are wet. So I don't know exactly how that all works. But I love when we do see Stripe, who is such a great villain, by the way.
Of course.
And
awesome.
they point out like, oh, this one here, I call him Stripe. He seems to be the leader. I'm like, hell yeah, he is. He's gonna kick your ass. Like, I loved everything with Stripe, and that you can tell that he is, the more intellectually evolved of them. Like, he's on a mission to spread, to multiply. He's also the one, I think, that uses a gun at least once or twice. I don't know if it's him, but he both times with
in the shopping center. It was he had
in
a
the
pistol.
shopping center, and then there's also in the bar. There's like, I guess some of the gremlins are playing poker. I don't know if that's Stripe that takes out a gun there and blows away one of the other gremlins. But
I know there was a poker table scene where one blows the other one's brains out for cheating, and I think you're right. I feel like I have this movie so memorized, and look, after 30 plus years, I'm still finding new stuff. Like, now I got to go find out if that was Stripe. And there was another one that was masked that also had a pistol, and it was in the bar scene where he was kind of chasing Phoebe Cates with. But yeah, you're right. He was totally the most intelligent one. He was the one with the plan. Both times he escaped death by Miss Peltzer, and then in the movie theater scene, like, both times he managed to get out. Yeah,
he just went across the street to get some snacks, and then Billy just ruins their whole party. So no, I love Stripe, and it does seem like they go after Mrs. Deagle specifically. Like, she's set up very early in the movie as kind of a combination basically of Scrooge, Cruella de Vil, and the Wicked Witch. I mean, she's even has that like, I'll get you when you least expect it. And I'm like, your little dog too, because it's literally what she's after. It does seem like they're specifically targeting Mrs. Deagle. They roll up to her house. Do you think there's a specific motivation behind them, like the other gremlins? I mean, other than just causing chaos, it does seem. I mean, I guess for the point of the movie, it's obviously we the audience want to see her, I guess, pay in some regard. Maybe not the way that they do it, but what are do you think that they went specifically to Mrs. Deagle's house?
I don't know. I don't know if they were like, oh, that's the lady that did, Billy wrong, so we're going to go kill her. But it is definitely the one death where we're at the audience like, meh.
Not so bad. It's all good.
I don't feel so bad. I've always felt sorry for the guy dressed up as Santa Claus where he has like 8 gremlins just on him attack. And the cops are just like, oh, look, that's what's his name that plays Santa.
Things on him?
Yeah, we got pistols and batons. Let's just drive the fuck out of here. Like, I don't like. They just left him to die a slow death of being covered by gremlins.
And then they get the karmic retribution because I think the gremlins cut their brake line, so that they end up getting into a car accident anyway. Which I feel like no one really focuses too much on how strong these gremlins are. Like he cut brake lines with I guess claws, talons, hands, all of the above, and also the one in the school like opened up a metal grate, like just slashed it open. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they're little, but they're strong and they're vicious, And so I guess they would have easily taken down a few of them. That Santa Claus. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny too watching this because this was really in the same way that E.T. started off the whole like a kid and an alien, they can be friends. Let's make that a genre. This was really a movie that started off a little mean monsters, and then after this you had like the Critters movies and all those that other thing. It really did kind of kick off a trend of films like this, and I don't think any of those other ones have ever really matched the level of this in large respect because of the way that they blend the horror and the comedy, and because you do believe these little things are running amok and destroying the town. And I think part of it is because of little things like you just mentioned, like you see just what they're capable of, and that they aren't just like mindless little creatures. I mean, they can get that way when you give them a few drinks, apparently, or show them a Disney movie. They kind of get super excited and into it. But they have intentionality, and they're clearly on a mission to do something. Whatever their end game is, I'd like to see that. Maybe the next Gremlins project could be sort of a post-apocalyptic, like the Gremlins have taken over, and then like what is that like now? Planet of the Apes, but with Gremlins or something. That would be interesting.
Anarchy, just be pure anarchy.
Oh man, it's so good. Let's see. I talked about the rules. Oh, we talked about the visual, the practical effects, obviously, and with the puppets. But I really thought the pupil stage, when they are transitioning from Mogwais to Gremlins, that gave me a lot of Alien vibes. For sure. Which was obviously intentional. But not only that, I think you get you get throughout the movie variations on the Gremlins and what happens to them, and I think that those things just looked so icky, and because they are practical effects, like they felt really tangible and real, and I think that carries on into later in the film when Stripe's death scene, the way that when he gets all like he's melting and stuff. I'm always impressed when I watch this movie just how great that stuff looks. I mean, we talked about the characters when they're in motion and stuff too, but like just I don't know, it's really still kind of impressive, and I can't help but be kind of awed by it every time I watch it.
And maybe I'm not sure if this was the movie's intention or it's just something that I think I'm seeing, but when you see them in that cocoon stage and Billy's mom goes up in the morning and sees them, to me it looks like it's the Gremlins, but like crouching and like tucking in their legs. And again, I don't know if that's the movie's intention or if it was just what I'm seeing, but it just looks like it's kind of like they're already in their Gremlin stage, but they're just like kind of busting out of this, I don't know, like placenta-like thing. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. But maybe that's what I'm seeing. I'm not too sure if that's what they intended.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. I mean, you can really appreciate the craft behind the movie, and when you see the details in moments like that. We mentioned already to the big showdown, I guess, kind of with Stripe and Billy, and how Stripe kind of low key emerges as one of the best movie villains of this period, at least. I think I don't even know how that. I guess it's just little moments, like little glances and cuts to Stripe throughout everything that you can tell his plan is evolving. But I really love that scene with Stripe and Billy. And to me, I mean, I'm a 36-year-old man. That scene was still kind of scary for what it is. He goes for the crossbow, the chainsaw, and all of that. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Oh yeah, the chainsaw alone, like the way the puppet's like running towards him, you're like, oh shit, he's fucking done. Like, he's like what's he? He's got nothing to protect against that. Like, yeah, he grabs a bat that gives him like temporary
for a moment,
blocking for a moment. And I'm trying to think what was it? The plug runs out. I don't even remember how he escapes from that. I'm blanking at the moment.
Yeah, I think the chainsaw gets stuck in the bat, or
no, Phoebe Cates turns the lights on and he's like freaks out, and then the chainsaw drags him away. I remember now.
Yeah.
And then he managed to get away. Yeah, like if it wasn't for, I guess it's not his girlfriend yet, but if it wasn't for her, he would have been done. It would have been over.
Yeah, no, totally. And then Gizmo came in his little pink car. And there's certain moments where you can tell that the movie was trying to find the way to have everything be as dark as it is, but also lighten the mood. Because I noticed, and I didn't even think I've ever really noticed this before, just because it's more of a subtle thing, but when Stripe like hits his head, like when after Gizmo comes in, there's like these cartoon like tweeting bird sound effects, and I was like, what the hell?
It's getting too dark and too scary. We need to make it safer for the kids.
Exactly. And I've noticed something recently, like in the last few years. I really grew up with this movie, Three Ninjas, from the early 90s that I used to watch like insanely all the time. And it's essentially just like Karate Kid meets Home Alone, basically. And there's on the soundtrack, there are a lot of moments where it's like psh, psh, boom, boom, like silly music and things like that. And and I think it was an intentional to like kind of lighten the tone and I guess take away the intensity of the violence. I think the Ninja Turtles movie, the original, kind of does that a little bit too. And as an adult, it really makes me want to see like, well, what was the original vision of that? Like with those elements stripped away, I still think that 1990 Ninja Turtles movie pretty much holds up. It does have a lot of kind of, practical creature effects and that kind of thing as well. So I'd be curious to see, maybe now if they did do more Gremlins, like they would be less afraid to lean into that because they would be tailoring it more to people like us that grew up with this movie.
Oh, I'm trying to think of seeing a movie done today with cartoon noises in it. Like, I don't know. I don't feel like it would work. It's not going to have the charm that Gremlins did. I can't imagine them doing it and making it work unless you brought in, the same team that did it. But even then, it would be a tough sell to do today.
Yeah, I know. I think Joe Dante wants to do it because I heard that Zach Galligan said that he was, Joe Dante wasn't specifically pleased with the way that the second one went, probably because it did lean too heavily on the comedy. I don't know if Chris Columbus, who is weirdly wrote this movie on spec before, Home Alone and everything took off. I don't know if he would really still be involved or want to be involved or be able to kind of tap into this after decades of doing like the most squeaky clean movies of all time. So I don't know how that would work. Regardless, I think that this movie in itself is definitely one of those big hallmark movies of the 80s. And I think it's sometimes gets forgotten in a way when we talk about Ghostbusters or Back to the Future or, Indiana Jones or Empire Strikes Back or things like that. I feel like a lot of people kind of forget about Gremlins. So in a way, I almost kind of want to see, I think they're doing some kind of animated show or something with Gremlins. I think that's what I heard about, something with that. So I have to look into exactly what that's about. But I think they should do something more with this property just because I feel like it's kind of faded in the cultural zeitgeist to a certain extent. Do you agree with that?
Well, I feel like every year, once a year, I will Google search Gremlins 3. Mm-hmm. And I always see like the script finally got approved, and it's gonna every year it's finally happening, and then next year it's like, all right, I know we said last year it was gonna finally happen, but this time it's really gonna happen. And it's like, I know we said it twice, but this one is for sure happening, and it never does. I don't know. I mean, I would say if the original creators don't want to do it, like maybe just have some of the fans do it, or let someone else who truly loves these movies. I don't know if you've seen, there is a fan made one.
Ooh, I feel like I might have seen that.
It was on YouTube. It was honestly not too bad for being a fan movie. It looks like there was definitely a lot of money for a fan movie that went into it, but it wasn't perfect. No, but it was pretty good for what it was. And if there were fans that took the time and put in, if not their own money, but raise the money to do that, then let someone else who loves the property as much to take over and let them do it.
Yeah. It looks like Gremlins Secrets of the Mogwai is the animated series. It's going to be on the Warner Media streaming service. It sounds like it's focusing on Mr. Wing when he was a kid and kind of how he met Gizmo and stuff. So obviously probably tailored specifically to children, not in the way that the original Gremlins movie was tailored to children, like an actual children's show. So I don't know how much I really have a specific interest in that per se, but it's good to see something with that. And to jump off of what you said about kind of the drawn out conversations about a third Gremlins. That's what that's what I thought for the longest time about a third Bill and Ted, and that's happening. That's filmed already.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, never say never, I guess.
I just hope. I don't know what the tone of the new Bill and Ted is going to be, but I would love it if it somehow transitioned, like Ted turned into John Wick. Like John Wick is in the new Bill and Ted, and he's just like a hardcore killer. I mean, obviously they're not going to do it, but if they kind of like mention some kind of John Wick in there, I think it'd be pretty funny. I hope they take the opportunity to do that. I feel like it would be a great comedic moment, but who knows?
I feel like with how crazy the John Wick series has gotten, it would be an easier sell for John Wick to be literally in the Matrix and like Neo just respawned as John Wick. I think that would be an easier leap to make than Bill and Ted. But maybe for original Bill and Ted, maybe that's John Wick's backstory. And
or something.
He's seen some shit doing, traveling through time and getting all these adventures. That's how that's how he's gotten as good as he is. Or maybe he has some kind of sports almanac about
became super rich.
Yeah, he became super rich, and that's how he knows what's going to happen, and that's why he's such a good assassin. He's literally seen the future. I think there's something there. Take that and roll with it, Keanu Reeves.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Matrix, because I believe they are doing another story, but I believe Keanu Reeves is also attached to it.
Yep.
I'm assuming that each Neo that pops up is just the same person, and I don't know if they got to him kind of later in life. I don't know what angle they're gonna take with it.
Yeah, same. I mean, The Matrix is essentially my favorite movie for a lot of reasons, and I have mixed feelings on the sequels, which I do want to. I'm probably gonna do an episode on those two films at some point, just because I don't think they're like garbage like a lot of people think, but I also don't think they're perfect. I think there's a lot of distinctions to be made between those two extremes, and those movies kind of fall in the middle for me. So yeah, it's I'm curious to see what they do with a fourth Matrix and a third Bill and Ted and the whatever Gremlins movie happens. So it's we're in that age now where pretty much anything that happened in the 90s or 80s, I feel like we're moved on from 80s to 90s nostalgia. So now everything, I mean, they already had 4 seasons of a Full House sequel series. So, I mean, I think all bets are off at this point.
As long as we get another Labyrinth, I'll be happy. That's another, outside of Gremlins, that's another one of my super top favorite. It's just sad that, super sad that we no longer have David Bowie to be in it. But who knows what musician they'll probably put in there.
Well,
side note,
have any
side
suggestions?
note, They actually wanted Michael Jackson for the original Labyrinth, but I don't. Probably a good idea that they didn't have in there with a baby. And,
yeah, I was gonna say
a teenager.
The fact that he was chasing down a baby boy and had to get his hands on that little boy. Yeah, probably a good idea they didn't go that route.
They saw it. They foresaw everything coming. I don't know.
They tapped into the John Wick Sports Almanac premise that I just mentioned. So, do you have any ideas for who you'd want? In a Labyrinth sequel, reboot, whatever that would be?
I don't know, man.
There's only one Bowie, so I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure how they would. It would have to be something very different.
I don't know. That's a very good question. I think it'd be interesting to put a rapper in there. I think it'd be kind of funny. Not what rapper, I don't know, but
Post Malone is the Goblin King or something.
Yeah, it'd just dropping bars every time, like the girl was trying to get her brother. I don't know.
Yeah. Is there? Who, like you said, with the Dark Crystal, hopefully we'll get a little bit of a renaissance with this kind of puppet action, and I don't mean like Happy Time Murders or Team America kind of puppet action. I mean like legit more of this kind of practical effects and such, because I would love to see that kind of making a major comeback in the near future. But is there anything else about Gremlins that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure we mention before we start winding down?
I feel like there was, and now I'm blanking. What was it? I don't know. If it comes up, I'll just interrupt you.
Yeah, that's totally cool. Totally cool. So, Cristian Garcia, can you tell people where they can find you on social media?
So everything is at Nerds with Friend, no S, because someone took it.
Bastard.
Someone beat us to it. That's for Instagram, Twitter. You can find us everywhere podcasts are. Stitcher. I think we're on Pandora now, Apple iTunes, Buzzsprout. I guess Podcoin is gone now. Trying to think. Anywhere you can listen to podcasts, you can find us. And if you do follow us on Instagram and Twitter, feel free to message us. We always respond back. We love hearing from people. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. Tell us what you want to hear. Tell us we suck. Whatever. We'll respond back.
Yeah, just tell you that you suck, but give a 5-star rating as well.
Yeah, I mean that's cool.
Yeah, that's how it works, right? So so this was a ton of fun. I'm glad we got a chance to talk about Gremlins, and you're totally welcome to come back to the show any other time. Maybe we could talk about Labyrinth. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah.
Delving back into the stuff.
Feel free if you want to come on our podcast.
Absolutely, I would love that.
We're not as structured as you, but feel free to come on.
No, that's I would love to do that. Let me know, and we'll make that happen sometime soon.
Sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Cristian. I appreciate having you on the show, and we'll definitely be in touch.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, man.
If you're interested in joining me on the show to chat about one of your favorite films, head on over to crookedtable.com/guest. Or you can consider supporting the show at patreon.com/crookedtable. Of course, you can always find more podcasts, reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Until next time, this has been the Crooked Table Podcast, and I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
CROOKED.